All right, hey, another 1980s news. Per the Hollywood Reporter, Fast Times at Ridgemount High was deemed pornography by the studio execs. And you know what I say to that? Yes, I agree.
You agree?
Yes, that's how I used it when I was in 1982.
All right. Well, yeah, if you're 14,
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
When I read this, I'm like, is deemed pornography. And in my mind, I put ... by someone who's never seen actual pornography.
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
It was a little salacious. It was
Yes.
somewhat titillating.
Yes.
It was not pornography.
You're right. Yes, it was not nearly as graphic as It wasn't even as graphic as 1980s pornography.
So,
actually
wait,
was.
Will, what do you mean you used it like pornography? I don't understand. Can you explain that to me?
You know, it's weird how since even though Kat's not here, I'm still censoring myself. There's so many times the Kat's around, I'm trying to
Well, she's going to hear it though. I mean, so you can, just say what you'd say around her. It's fine.
Yes, of course. I think we talked about this.
You've dodged the question.
Oh no, I'm answering your question.
Okay, all right.
I think we talked about this before as being one of these films that has, one of the most paused moments in 1980s movie.
Course.
And paused so you could, leer at a nude or semi-nude woman.
Right.
When this film actually came out, I was too young probably to fully appreciate it. But there was still some kind of spark that went off.
Well, and it's shot in it feels like a dream sequence. It's super surreal. Yes. It's super idealized, and it's. They mentioned that in Stranger Things 4. They're riding in the car, and he's talking about. Well, they paused Fast Time at exactly this time code.
Right.
Who pauses it at exactly this time code? Boobies.
Right. Yes.
Stop
he's like,
saying
it's
that
a thing
word.
It's a thing we both like.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So this year, the film celebrated its 40th anniversary, and so just this past month, we've got some new interviews with folks, including with Judge Reinhold, who said that, quote, "We were really heartsick because somebody high up said this is pornography, and there's no way Universal is going to release this movie." Reinhold, however, countered, saying that we didn't see it as this horny high school movie at all. We saw it as having the opportunity to do something authentic that was based on the actual experiences of the kids that Cameron chronicled for the whole year, end quote. If folks don't know, this is based on a book that Cameron Crowe wrote based on his experience, 21 Jump Streeting, a high school, when he was younger, to write a book. He pretended to be a kid at a school and wrote a book based on what he observed.
For a whole year. Yeah, I think I read. He stayed for a whole year. Yeah.
And he was 45 at the time.
All right. He was a senior.
Yeah.
Well, it also had, I had to go back. It's been a while since I watched Fast Times, but I'm remembering, I think when they categorize this as pornography, I mean, maybe they're just talking about being very upfront about sexual discussions and content. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about abortion. There's discussion about losing your virginity. There's a lot of stuff in there that, it wasn't Donald Duck cartoons. I mean, this was stuff that people like to pretend kids don't deal with, but kids do deal with it. And this film kind of brought it to the fore. And I think that's why it resonated with so many people, despite the fact that they gave it a crappy release and didn't promote it.
Yeah, and that's probably why, to your earlier point, that adults were, dismissing it as porn because they couldn't connect with it. Or, like many folks, and I don't know that I've done this with my own kids because we're pretty open, but there are topics that come up that you think, I wish my kid didn't have to be dealing with that. And I kind of pretend they're not.
There's plenty of time to deal with that later. Don't worry about that now. I wish,
My wife had the opposite approach. She's like, I'm going to tell our daughters like everything now. And she had a logic. She said, look, I want them to learn from me before some boy gets a hold of them and teaches them the wrong thing or uses the information as currency, of some kind.
I don't want you to learn it on the street.
Yeah. Got my kids working the street.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
Well, you're right. As you mentioned, even though it was in limited release and initially, and because, and not supported with advertising because the studio felt this way, it was a hit. It landed on limited release on October 13th in 1982. And through word of mouth, mostly by the young folks who appreciated it, I'm sure, it cracked the year's top 30 at the domestic box office.
They said people keep coming back to the theater and they had memorized the dialogue like Star Wars nerds do today, right?
Yeah.
Like Star Trek nerds do. They know every line. They were coming back again and again and again. And the studio had to go, well, maybe there's something to this pornography. It would put it out there.
You know, I think, and I read, I wasn't thinking about it this way because, again, we were sort of, most of us discussed the Phoebe Cates scene, you know, which is the most, I guess, is iconic. But Jennifer Jason Leigh is nude more often in the film and more nude. I mean, she's completely naked in some scenes. And a lot of it follows sort of her, I guess, sexual awakening as a young person in the story. I've read this interesting thing that I hadn't thought about. It was basically arguing that maybe there certainly we had gratuitous nudity, but you couldn't say it was gratuitous in Fast Times, I guess is what I was reading.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good point to make here. I don't know.
I had a buddy that when he asked for film reviews, he just said, do you get to see anything?
Yeah.
Like he didn't care quality of the film.
Yeah.
He didn't care who was in it. He didn't care big explosions. Do you see anything? So I saw this movie. Tell me about it. Did you see anything?
Yeah. Like, well, I saw car crashes and explosions.
You know what I mean, John.
Say it. You got to say it. We got Bush. We have Bush. But I think this, again, we could do a whole episode on gratuitous nudity in the 1980s and talk about films that whether they have it or not. Why? Because it'd be titillating. And
talk about clickbait. Let's do it.
Did you say what kind of bait?
Click.
Oh, click. Yeah, clickbait. Yes, click. Right, yes.
Enunciate.
But in Fast Times, you know, the scene with Phoebe Cates, they argued, is not gratuitous because it's a fantasy. And young men fantasized about women being nude, you know, when you're at that age. And the stuff with Jennifer Jason Leigh, it was in the context of her exploring her sexuality, her having sex with this, you know, this other character. So it makes sense. There's plenty of other films that have gratuitous nudity, but this at least wasn't among them.
You know, like actual pornography.
Wait a second. Well, that's a whole philosophical question now. It can't be gratuitous if it's porn, right? Because it's necessary for the sake of having sex. Well, now you raise another question. This is just going down a bizarre rabbit hole. What if in pornography they have sex, but they don't take off their clothes entirely? They just have, is this any of this getting in the show? They only have the areas necessary exposed. We can't even see them. We're just led to believe they're having sex. There's nothing gratuitous about the nudity now. I don't know what I'm asking.
I think then it's not pornography. Then it's just, then it's just PG-13.
It's my, let's say it's my fifth favorite category.
Then it's just Porky's at that point.
Yeah. All right, that's probably enough of that. Heckerling made this interesting comment that I think it goes along with what you said is how different things are today, including the fact that filmmakers were more ready to talk about these things that were on the minds and hearts and happening to young people in the early 1980s. And, you know, this film also reminds me of a film it was often compared with, which was Last American Virgin, which again dealt very openly. Now, that was more of a sexy romp at times, but it dealt with abortion. It dealt with, you know, sex in a different way than Porky's and those kind of, you know, really just body over the top films. Heckerling points out you probably couldn't get a film like this today because of the topics that it touches upon, and which is kind of sad because, and backwards, because it's important for parents to know about what's going on with their kids and for kids to know other people see them and understand these things.
Well, I think if that film was done today, though, it would be, it's interesting now that you mentioned that, to look at it through a lens today, that would be a much more politicized film. Whereas in Fast Times, it was really just looking at it through the eyes of these kids who are experiencing it and trying to figure it out on their own. And you do it today, and it's going to be, you know, which side of the aisle do you fall on? Is how do you look at it? It'd be more politicized. Very different film. Yeah.
Right. You're right.
And we don't need all that politics in it. It's about the experience. It's about growing up is the part we need. Yeah. It would. Yeah. Don't remake this one. Quit it.
Yeah.
Don't do that one again.
Are there two characters in Fast Times we can have a spin-off that was happening?
Just something parallel.
Like Nick Cage's character or what's his name? There's so many good actors in this that, you know, Eric Stoltz is in it.
Eric Stoltz, Forrest Whitaker.
What's his name from Nerds? The guys at Anthony Edwards.
Edwards, yeah.
Maybe those guys. All right. Hey, that was 1980s news.